this is Artie and Marissa, and you are listening to the podcast Birth Yourself Brave. Gone Too Soon is the name of this podcast, where we're going to talk about the losses that we've experienced and ways to be able to help us cope, overcome these. It's not to actually eradicate grief, because that's not possible. Rather, it is to develop coping mechanisms. Now, the fact that you're hearing it is good news, because if you have gone through grief and lost an individual, one of the hardest and most challenging aspects of grief is to start dealing with it. It's much easier to put your head under the ground and pretend it didn't happen, or to bottle up your feelings, which will overspill at a later time. Everybody's grief journey is different. So if you're here listening to this today, it's because you want some sort of healing, some sort of ideas to be able to go through this journey of grief. And when I talk about gone too soon, yes, I'm talking about death as such. And death is an ending, but it can also be seen as an opportunity for a beginning. So it's a matter of reframing our experiences in our life so that we can go through them with a sense of calmness, courage, and confidence. Now, a missed period may be a sign that you have fallen pregnant. And after a few weeks, or maybe a scan, you find out that you've lost your baby and you've miscarried. That is a loss, as well as losing your great-grandmother who you've known for all your life. The reason why I'm mentioning both these experiences is because one is often not spoken about, and the other, we can openly speak about it. I myself had a 20-week stillbirth of my daughter, which I did not grieve at that moment in time. 8 weeks later, I lost my dad, and in a way, when he died, it gave me permission to grieve for Alma, for my daughter, as well as for my dad. And this is what started my journey and my complete commitment to empower others, because it's about transforming our overwhelm into positivity in a way that's beyond us. It's about tuning in to what we're here for, which is primarily to serve, to help each other, to realize how together we are a source of power and support. So if you've had a miscarriage or are supporting others who have had miscarriages or have lost children, do tune in to an interview I have had with IVF consultant. It will be in the description below. We talk together about different ways to help others who have gone through recurrent miscarriages, so recurrent griefs. And we briefly touch about implantation failure as well. It's definitely worth looking into that. I've also prepared an offering for you, inspired by this podcast, which is Permission to Grieve. And it is a collection of mindfulness audios, as well as a workbook where there is place to colour, to journal, and to process your grief, to acknowledge it. Again, this will be in the description as well if you resonate with it. But let's get back to talking about the theory of grief. Sometimes understanding the research that there is, the different models, it gives us the ability to process it ourselves, as well as helping others. And I'm going to come to the conclusion that it's different for everyone. But because everybody has their own framework, it is nice to know about the different models that different individuals have formed to help us understand this further. So the main one that a lot of us are familiar with is the Kubler-Ross model of grief, which says that grief has 5 different aspects to it. So initially you're in denial, you just cannot believe it's happening to you. Then you start becoming angry. Why is it happening to you? You start bargaining. I'll do anything to change this. You get into a stage of depression. What is the point of carrying on? And then you gradually come to that acceptance. Now, a lot of us don't go through all of these. Yet, it is important to be aware of this framework, because when we are experiencing different emotions, we can label them. And as we know, when we label emotions, that in itself is healing. There's another model which is called dual process model. And it is hovering and switching between 2 states of our bereavement process, which are called loss-oriented stressor and restoration-oriented stressor. So the descriptions speak for themselves. When we are going through that loss-oriented process, it involves focusing to process the loss of our loved one and the relationship that we've lost, remembering the times that we were with them, and imagining what the person would say when they're with us. And difficult emotions such as loneliness, sadness, fear, pain, and anger again can surface. The second stage is the restoration-oriented aspect, which is all about being distracted from the experience and allowing yourself to get on with day-to-day life, which in a sense, when somebody dies, we do, because we have the funeral to cope with, the guest list, all the other aspects of somebody dying, such as the will to go through, what they've left behind. There's a lot of different aspects where you're still remembering, but you're keeping yourself busy. But this goes a step further to carry on with going back to work. Yet sometimes you can go back to work too soon, or never go back to work, which is maybe a way of transforming this experience into leading you towards what you really want to do, which is exactly what happened to me. It was about reframing it and seeing, what is my life purpose? Am I actually fulfilling it? So this is another model to help us understand what we go through. The third one I wanted to mention was Warden's model of grief, where 4 tasks are described to be able to go through the journey of mourning. The first task is accepting the reality of loss. So it's about realizing that you have lost a loved one. It's about being aware that death occurs, that that person is no longer there. And also investigating how the death happened as well. So it's accepting that reality. The second task is to experience the pain of the loss. Now this is rather mechanical, because how can you experience the pain of the loss? It's multifaceted. It's beyond time and space sometimes. So it is rather abstract, but keeping it simple and practical. It's all about identifying the emotions that come with it and working through them to acknowledge the emotions. And you can see the parallelism between all these models, because we here are asked to acknowledge our sadness, fear, loneliness, despair, hopelessness, anger, guilt, blame, all of them. A bouquet of emotions. So, experiencing the pain of loss. Third task is to adjust to a new life without the lost person, which is pretty much similar to the previous model's restoration-oriented aspect. And it's about getting used to that the person is not there, building a life without them. And this takes time. It's a routine. It's being able to have a structure. And the fourth task is reinvestment in the new reality, which is a follow-on on the previous one. It's about finding enduring connection with your loved one, as well as embarking on a new life. So here we explain these different aspects, and also, sorry, I forgot to mention that this model is also known as the tier model of grief. Lastly, now let's the one, my favorite one for last, which you may be familiar with, which is Tonking's model, growing around grief. And what Louise Tonking suggests is an alternative to the models explained before. And the suggestion here is that our grief does not reduce over time. Instead, we become bigger to be able to live with it. So it is not getting rid of grief or asking it to go away. Rather, is integrating our loss of the person in our day-to-day life, so that we are allowed to go through all these stages, all these different models every day, and still start new again, because it's everybody's individual journey. It's about remembering anniversaries with love and kindness to yourself, with gentleness to yourself. So these are models. And my request to you is to invest time. If you've lost a job, lost a loved one, lost a limb, lost anything in life, whenever we lose, it's too soon. We've never had enough time to indulge in it, to relish it, to rejoice it. So take some time to acknowledge your loss. Invite yourself to be enveloped with love and kindness. And it's okay if we cry. It's okay if we have emotional outbursts. Just surround yourself with those who love and care for you, because it will make the process easier. And one of the ways to do this is by engaging in a nurturing act, going for a beautiful reflexology session when this lockdown is over and we're allowed to, wherever you are in the world. Seeking out for online consultations, which have never stopped. Batch flower remedies are amazing. I'm going to be, right now after this, I'll be interviewing a familiar guest where we'll be talking about the batch flowers. So definitely look into how you can create a space to talk about the person you've lost, as well as nurturing yourself, developing coping skill and easing the challenges. Isn't that what life is about? To go through life, to navigate through life with a sense of detachment, yet rejoicing, so that we remain unaffected, so to say, but we're fully integrated. It's a paradox, but life is a paradox. All we need to do is, when we go through certain difficult emotion and challenges in our life, try not to judge. We take things too seriously, we compare our journey with others. So what's happening? We're already in a state of negativity and we're making it harder for ourselves. So you please don't be that person that makes it hard for yourself. There'll be plenty of other people that do that, and they do it very well. So protect yourself, create boundaries. I also run monthly workshops, Clear Mind, Confident Body. So if you need support, I offer one-to-one as well as these group sessions. Please reach out. And ease yourself into the new reality, navigating through grief as and when it appears. Now we're going to talk to our familiar guest, author, BFRP Leslie Cook, where she shares her 30 years of batch flower experience and how these life-changing flower remedies can help with grief. Welcome, Leslie, again.
Hello, Artie. Lovely to chat with you again.
Yes, I think it's so heartwarming to be able to share your experience with everybody listening, because grief is such a common emotion right now. Would you say that as well?
Oh, I think so. And for so many things, it's easy, isn't it, to think initially of grief as just because someone close to you has died. But it's grief for so many causes in this last year, whether you've lost a job or you've lost the hope of, I don't know, buying your first home, or you're stuck with long COVID. I mean, there's a grief in that. It's completely original. So yes, so much grief about it at the moment.
Yes, definitely. And we're talking about gone too soon. So whatever we have in our life, it seems that we don't get time to rejoice it. And by the time we start getting used to it, it's over as well.
Yes.
It goes too quickly, just like the wind.
Yes, I'm afraid that's right. And I mean, that's a form of mindfulness lacking there, isn't it? That we don't sort of take enough interest in in our joys and sources of gratitude.
Definitely, yes. And I'm sure you've experienced the same, Leslie, when time stands still, when you're so focused and attentive to the task on hand, that it might have just been a few minutes, but for you, it's been hours.
Yes. There's a poem, and I'd have to look it up to remember it exactly. I think it's a Walter de la Mare poem. And there's a line in it about, look thy last on all things lovely every hour. And I think that is, really hits the nail on the head that, we need to spend, at least once an hour, we need to remember that this may be the last time we experience this moment, this joy, this ability to feel grateful. I thought that was a lovely line.
It is. Leslie, I'm going to ask you to repeat that. I'm going to invite everybody that's listening just to take a moment, and it's just, I think it's a sentence, if not more, to just repeat that so that everybody can tune into what the pearls of wisdom you've shared with us.
So I think this is from Walter de la Mare, and I'd have to check it.
It's fine, yeah.
But it goes, look thy last on all things lovely every hour.
Beautiful. It gives us the invitation to pause for that moment, which sometimes is all we have, a moment of stillness.
Yes.
Yes, and today we thought we'll talk about a few of the Batch Flower remedies. I've got an introduction and a small little ebook, and Leslie, you've written 2 wonderful books. So if anybody wants to explore that further, there is a lot of resources available. But just in terms of the initial grief or the news, what would you suggest? What flower remedies do you feel are worthy, or more than worthy, are worthwhile to talk a little bit about?
Well, I think we're undoubtedly, one would think of rescue remedy to begin with, especially in that initial shock when you have, you're grieving for something. You may have been grieving because you've lost someone close to, or the shock of a serious car accident, and of course in that rescue remedy, and also I mean, the beauty about rescue remedy is most of us have it on us all the time, whereas we may not have some of the other remedies quite so readily to hand. And of course, in rescue remedy, you've got Star of Bethlehem, which is very much for grief and trauma and shock. And as people go on with their period of mourning or bereavement, and I'm using those terms of mourning for any type of grief. I mean, it may not just be the loss of a close one. It may be all the other forms of grief, having a life-changing illness, for instance, or being an amputee and losing a limb, or having something go wrong with you so that your hopes of doing something grand, like say running in the London Marathon, are now over, if not for your lifetime, at least for initially. So something like Star of Bethlehem, which is in rescue remedy, is great for things like that. And of course, if you really are in a tunnel without any light at the end of it that you can see, then you'd be looking at, say, Sweet Chestnut, because that is so great when you absolutely feel at the end of your tether and you just can't see any way of putting one foot in front of another. And then on the sort of, those are the sort of what you might call the heaviest remedies. But you'd also be looking at remedies such as, for instance, walnut, where you have trouble making that transition. Perhaps you've had to move house, perhaps you've been evicted, and you're grieving the loss of your home, and you have difficulty adapting to change. So walnut would help you adapt to that change. And also, of course, if you've got that sort of a situation, you could be looking at honeysuckle, where you're constantly thinking about the past. And so instead of being able to have the energy available, the mental and emotional energy available to build for the future and look to the future, you are so shackled by the past that you can't get free of it, then honeysuckle. So we're looking at those 4 or 5 remedies: honeysuckle, walnut, Star of Bethlehem, sweet chestnut, and initially rescue remedy.
That's brilliant, Leslie. You know, there are a total of 38 remedies, plus the rescue remedy, which is a combination of 5. But the ones that you've mentioned are really so apt. And of course, it's where the person is, what we were discussing before as well. It depends on how you're feeling, like that onion peeling effect. But Star of Bethlehem is so pivotal in anyone's grief journey, whatever they've lost.
Yes, that's right. And I think Dr. Bach says about it that it's for those who initially refuse to be consoled. And I think we have to bear that very much in mind with grief initially, that people almost feel guilty if they're not thinking about their loss or their loved one every minute of every day. And so in that sense, they refuse to be consoled because it's part of their grief process that they have to take their time to accept the fact that actually it is all right to move on it. And the rescue remedies, especially chosen in an appropriate mix, will help people to come to terms with that.
Definitely. That just allowed me to think about another remedy, which we haven't mentioned, but may be appropriate depending if the individual is feeling that, which is pine, which is guilt.
Yes.
Guilt of not remembering their loved one, and that's why they are unable to move on. Even walnut won't work there. That change, isn't it? If you're not willing to give up that guilt, and guilt is one of the most coarsest emotions.
Yes, and isn't it strange that whenever somebody dies, the person's close to them who's going to miss them and lose them, they will always have a feeling of guilt. They always say, I wish I'd done more. If only I'd been there. If only I had told him I loved him, or whatever. There's always that feeling of guilt.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the way you navigate through to sweet chestnut, because initially sweet chestnut, when somebody dies, is not appropriate, not depending on what they're going through, because they haven't allowed the grief to sink in. So the pine or the Star of Bethlehem, just to be able to be open to that, then gives that light to, or that permission to be able to see that light at the end of the tunnel. I love the way you've took us on this journey.
Yes, that's right. Thank you.
And honeysuckle, again, I'm just reinforcing what you said. Honeysuckle is one that often people don't realize that they actually need, because they're living in their past. Is actually, for them, it feels they're living in the present because they've made the past the present.
Yes, that's right. And the thing is, as we know, that if you're not moving forward in life, then actually you're stagnating. So if you're living in the past and not living in the present, you are stagnating on all sorts of levels. And that's all the more reason to bring your energy and your focus back into the present.
Definitely. And then my all-time favorite, of course, is a rescue remedy, but even walnut. I think everybody needs a bit of walnut together with a rescue remedy.
Yes. More often, again, as you say, and particularly this last year, where we've had to, even if we're not adapting to grief, we've had to adapt to so many different things. Yes.
Definitely. And one of the things that helped me a lot, and I think I've mentioned this before, is when I qualified a few years ago, much later than you, is your book Space to Think. I was going through grief myself, and I remember buying your book without even meeting you, actually. And it's funny, isn't it? None of the Batchflower books stay with us. We end up giving them away. I had to buy another one from you. But yes, Space to Think is a lovely, literally, it does what it says. It gives you space to think.
Yes, thank you.
So sorry.
No, I was only going to say that I was thinking, this is a few years back, and I was thinking about grief. There was a couple of people in my circle who were both going through grief. One lady, she was an acquaintance, she lost a young child to cancer, and another friend was coping with a different sort of grief. and it made me write a poem about it. And I wonder whether you'd like to hear it.
Yes, please. And again, if anybody is doing something, just give yourself the permission to tune into poem. I think poetry is an expression of creativity, which allows us to become the author of the poem as well. So yes, please, Leslie, I would love to hear it.
Thank you. Well, it's called Healing Comes Like Gentle Rain. I am the rain falling soft on your soul, falling on your parched lands, filling up the rivers of your tears. I am the rain falling in the darkness of your night, swelling your sleep with dreams of hope. When daylight comes, there will be green shoots. Through your tears, you will see rainbows of glory, for I make all things new. I will melt your bones, which dried to stone under the torturing sun, and you will be renewed. I pour out my healing, and your soul draws it in. I am refreshment and recreation, and my touch is soft on your open palms. I will wash away all the dust of dispiritment, baptize your feet and hands, bless your clouded face. There will be rejoicing, and you will learn to smile again.
That definitely takes you on a journey. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome, Artie.
I think it's taken you back as well to when you wrote it. It's very emotionally charged, and it's actually you can by hearing this poem, and everybody can just rewind and play it again to hear it. But it gives you that hope, allowing you to tune in to what you are going through. It still navigates you to that rainbow, to that.
Yes, that's right.
And rain is so metaphorical in so many different beliefs and faiths, isn't it? Rain is transformational.
Yes, and I mean, often we think of rain as a sort of a storm of rain, but when it falls in that really soft, gentle mizzle, it's doing sort of all the good it needs to, but without any sort of power behind it. By power, I mean force, without any force behind it. In a way, the Bach flower remedies are like that, aren't they? They're so gentle and so soft, and yet they have this transformative power. And of course, it's water again, isn't it? I mean, you've got the water taking up the imprint of the flower essence, and you wouldn't have flowers without rain. So it's all a complete cycle, really.
It is, and in a way, you have to have loved to have experienced that loss. So if we are experiencing loss, it's because we have loved.
Yes.
Which is a blessing as well, in a way. It's just that reframing what we have into I would say in a realistic manner, because sometimes when we talk about positivity, people think being positive is being unrealistic, but it's not. It's being positively realistic.
Yes, quite.
Well, thank you, Leslie. It's like always, it's fantastic to talk to you, and thank you for mentioning these wonderful flower remedies and your book, and your poem.
Thank you very much indeed, Artie. It's been lovely talking to you again. Look forward to talking again soon.
Likewise. Well, have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe for future episodes, and also to let other people know that we exist. If there are any links that I mentioned in the podcast that you're unable to view, visit my website artieamarissa.com under the tab of podcasts. I hope you've enjoyed and have a lovely day.